Elias stirred slowly, his mind heavy from exhaustion. The last few days had blurred into a haze of repairs, calculations, and sleepless nights. The outpost on the edge of Rathar 9, a barren frontier planet, offered little comfort. Its metallic walls rattled under the constant wind, and the faint hum of the generators provided the only company in the lonely expanse. He rolled over, stretching muscles stiff from hours of tense work. His hand grazed the console beside him, checking the energy readings. Everything seemed normal, too normal perhaps. The feeling in his gut told him something was wrong, but he couldn't place it. A sudden click of heavy armor echoed in the silent room. Elias froze. His instincts screamed danger, but he was unarmed. His tools and makeshift weapons were scattered outside in the workshop. Whoever or whatever was approaching had complete control. "Elias," a voice said. It was deep, commanding, and carried a strange cadence that made the walls themselves seem to tremble. He blinked and slowly lifted his head. Standing over him was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. Kalara, the alien warlord of legend, towered over him. Her skin shimmered faintly in shades of violet and silver, her eyes like molten amber, sharp and unyielding. Every movement she made radiated power and authority. "You are mine," she said simply. Elias's mind went blank. "Excuse me?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Kalara's expression didn't soften. "I declare you my mate." For a moment, Elias couldn't process the words. Mate? He knew alien customs were strange, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. He tried to scramble backward, but the bed pressed against his back and the warlord's presence filled the room, leaving him no room to escape. I don't understand," he stammered. "There must be some mistake. I'm just a human engineer. I don't even—" "You were chosen," Kalara interrupted, her voice firm and absolute. "The prophecy requires it. Resistance is unwise." Elias swallowed hard, trying to steady his racing heart. He had read fragments of alien history and stolen data archives, but nothing had prepared him for this. The stories of Kalara's campaigns, her conquest across star systems, all painted a picture of fearsome power, and now she was standing above him, declaring him hers, completely unarmed and utterly vulnerable. The room seemed smaller, the shadows deeper, as the weight of reality sank in. He was on a foreign world with no allies, no weapons, and a warlord who considered him a possession. The walls of the outpost seemed to close in, and for the first time in years, Elias felt the raw edge of fear. Kalara stepped closer, her armor clinking softly with each movement. She reached out a hand, her fingers long and tipped with faintly glowing nails. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked. I think so," Elias admitted reluctantly. "But I can't just... I'm human. I'm not. Ready for... You will learn," she said, her eyes locking onto his. There was no anger, only certainty. "You will follow me to my fortress. There, you will understand the responsibilities of your new position. You will be trained, protected, and..." She paused, letting the words linger like a hammer on stone. "Bonded to me." The words sent a chill through Elias's veins. Bonded? He had no idea what it truly meant, but the serious tone and the sheer force behind her declaration left him with one stark conclusion. Survival depended on compliance. He nodded slowly, trying to calm himself. "Okay, I'll come," he said, though the voice sounded foreign even to him. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to fight, but it was useless. He was unarmed, alone, and the warlord standing before him was far beyond anything he could challenge. Kalara's eyes narrowed slightly, and then a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval followed. She gestured toward the door. "Follow me. Your journey begins now." Elias rose carefully, trying not to show the trembling of his limbs. As he walked behind Kalara, he couldn't help but notice the alien guards outside the room. Their eyes, sharp and calculating, followed his every move. They were strong, disciplined, and deadly. His presence here clearly noted as an event of significance. The fortress itself was a sight that stole his breath away. Jagged black stone spiraled upward like frozen lightning, intertwined with living trees whose bioluminescent leaves pulsed gently. Alien technology hummed through the air, faintly touching every surface with energy fields and protective barriers. Elias felt dwarfed, insignificant even as his mind raced, trying to find patterns, weaknesses, or opportunities. Kalara led him through a vast corridor, The walls adorned with symbols and carvings of battles long past. Scenes of warriors, victories, and rituals seemed almost alive, telling stories of power, loyalty, and sacrifice. Elias's human mind struggled to process them all. These were not just decorative. They were lessons in history, warnings and commands all at once. Finally, they entered a chamber that looked part throne room, part command center. Holographic maps of nearby systems floated in the air, and alien officers discussed strategies in hushed tones. The moment Elias stepped inside, silence fell. All eyes turned toward him. Whispers spread through the chamber, their language alien and sharp, but the tone carried clear meaning. The human chosen by Kalara. Elias's stomach churned. He could feel their judgment, the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on him. He tried to straighten his posture to appear composed, but his nerves betrayed him. I am not ready for this, he thought. I am not even trained to survive here. Kalara's gaze swept over the assembled figures. This human, she said in a voice that demanded attention, is now my mate. He will stand with us. He will learn. And he will be honored as dictated by our customs. A low murmur ran through the room. Some faces expressed awe, some skepticism, others outright disbelief. Elias felt the alien culture's weight like a tidal wave pressing against him, threatening to sweep him away. He wanted to speak, to protest, to clarify that he was just a human, but Kalara's presence silenced every thought. Hours passed as Kalara explained the ancient rituals that bound a mate to their leader. Elias listened, mostly in silence, absorbing fragments of meaning: loyalty, shared responsibility, protection, strategy, and a promise of partnership unlike anything in human history. The concepts were foreign, almost incomprehensible, yet the logic beneath them was undeniable. To survive here, he had to learn, adapt, and think like they did. At some point, fatigue overcame him again. He sank into a cushion, exhausted, but Kalara remained standing, her eyes fixed on him. Rest now, she said finally. You will need strength for what is to come. Tomorrow, your training begins. Your life, your mind, and your ingenuity will be tested. But know this, failure is not an option. The survival of many depends on your adaptation. Elias closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him. Fear still clung to the edges of his mind, but a spark of determination flared within. He was a human, unarmed and unprepared, thrust into a world where strength and strategy were valued above all else. Yet he was also intelligent, resourceful, and adaptable. As sleep claimed him once more, he wondered what tomorrow would bring. Would he be crushed beneath the alien expectations? Or would he find a way to survive, to turn this impossible situation into something that only a human could achieve? Somewhere in the back of his mind, a quiet thought whispered, they may be strong, but we humans, we never stop finding a way. The morning light filtered through the towering windows of Kalara's fortress, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Elias woke slowly, his mind still heavy from the events of the previous night. The reality of his situation had begun to settle in. He was no longer merely a human stranded on a frontier planet. He was now tied by alien law and ritual to one of the most powerful warlords in this sector. Kalara waited outside his room, her posture regal and unyielding. Her eyes scanned him with the intensity of a predator assessing prey, though her expression contained a hint of curiosity. Elias, she said, her voice both commanding and calm, today your lessons begin. Elias swallowed hard and rose to his feet. Lessons? He asked cautiously. What kind of lessons? The kind that will ensure your survival and your usefulness, Kalara replied. You must understand our people, our customs, and our ways of war. Only then can you become more than just a human brought here by prophecy. The hallways of the fortress were vast, lined with carvings that told the story of Kalara's conquests. Scenes of warriors fighting, cities defended, and rituals performed filled the walls, each one intricate and alive with meaning. Elias ran his fingers along the carvings, trying to decipher the history and strategy embedded in the art. Every detail seemed purposeful, every gesture precise. You are observing more than decoration, Kalara said, noticing his attention. Each carving teaches. The success or failure of every soldier, every decision has been recorded here. To ignore it is to ignore our history, and your future. Elias nodded, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on his ability to learn quickly, but this was unlike anything he had studied before. Alien culture, technology, and combat strategy were all intertwined in ways humans rarely encountered. He realized that survival here would require not just courage but intelligence, adaptability, and keen observation. Kalara led him to a large chamber that served as a command center. Holographic maps floated in the air displaying nearby planets, fleets, and resources. Alien officers moved quickly, discussing strategies and responding to alerts. Elias could feel the energy in the room, the intensity of planning and anticipation. "You will observe, then participate," Kalara said. "I need to know if you can think like we do. If humans are to be considered useful, they must learn not only our rules but the logic behind them." Elias nodded again, feeling the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He took a deep breath and began scanning the holographic maps. His engineering mind started analyzing patterns, supply lines, and troop movements. Though his knowledge of alien technology was limited, some concepts were universal. Resource management, positioning, and strategy could be understood if approached logically. Kalara watched him silently, her expression unreadable. After a long moment, she asked, "What do you see, human?" Elias pointed to a cluster of planets near the frontier. "These seem vulnerable," he said. "The defense grids are spread thin, and the patrols follow predictable paths. If an enemy wanted to gain a foothold, they would target these first." Kalara raised an eyebrow, impressed despite herself. "You analyze patterns quickly, that is useful." Elias swallowed, feeling a spark of pride amidst the fear. He realized that even in this strange alien world, his human mind, his ingenuity and curiosity, could give him a place. But he also understood the danger. Misstep here, and it could mean death. Over the next several days, Kalara introduced him to the fortress in more detail. He learned about the alien hierarchy, their combat techniques, and their communication methods. The alien guards were strict but disciplined, following rules that emphasized loyalty, honor, and efficiency. Elias struggled at first. Many of the customs were difficult to remember, and the physical training was rigorous. He was expected to keep up with soldiers far larger and stronger than him. But he quickly discovered that his strength lay not in raw power, but in observation and adaptation. He watched the soldiers' movements carefully, noting patterns, weaknesses, and tactics. Then he practiced replicating them in his own way, using speed, precision, and clever maneuvers rather than brute force. Kalara observed silently, occasionally offering corrections or guidance. She seemed to be testing not only his ability to learn but his determination. Elias began to notice a pattern in her behavior. She respected initiative and ingenuity. If he could demonstrate intelligence and resourcefulness, she was willing to tolerate his human limitations. One evening, as Elias sat reviewing holographic battle simulations, Kalara approached. "You are different from others I have claimed," she said. "Most would panic, resist, or fail to understand our ways. You observe, analyze, and adapt. This intrigues me." Elias hesitated. "I'm just trying to survive," he admitted. "I don't want trouble." Kalara's eyes softened slightly. "Survival is the first step. Adaptation is the second. And mastery comes only to those willing to understand not just strength but strategy, patience, and foresight." The lessons continued. Elias was shown the fortress's weapon systems, taught to read alien star charts, and trained in basic combat techniques. Though the physical demands were harsh, he excelled in problem-solving and tactical thinking. Slowly, he began earning the respect of some of the alien soldiers. They were wary at first, suspicious of a human in their midst, but his competence could not be denied. One afternoon, as he repaired a malfunctioning drone, an officer approached. "Human, your calculations saved the patrol fleet from wasting cycles on a faulty sensor. Kalara speaks highly of you," the officer said, clearly surprised. Elias felt a small surge of satisfaction. "Thanks," he replied. "I'm just trying to understand your technology." The officer nodded slowly, still uncertain, but clearly impressed. "Humans. Maybe there is more potential than we thought." Kalara observed this interaction from a distance, her face unreadable. Elias realized that earning respect in this society would require consistent effort, intelligence, and courage. Simple obedience was not enough. He needed to prove that humans could match the cunning and skill of alien minds. Despite the rigorous training, there were moments of quiet. Elias would explore the fortress, marveling at the blend of technology and nature. Trees grew through stone floors, their roots intertwined with circuits. Pools of glowing water reflected the alien architecture, creating a serene contrast to the discipline and power surrounding him. One evening, Kaylara found him staring at a star map. "You study the frontier," she noted. Elias nodded. "I'm trying to understand the systems, the planets, the people. If I can understand them, I can predict what comes next." Kaylara considered him for a long moment. "Prediction is a form of power," she said. "Use it wisely. Knowledge alone is not enough. It must be applied." The word stayed with Elias. Slowly, he began to see a path forward. He would not merely survive as Kaylara's mate. He could thrive, contribute, and perhaps even influence events. His human perspective, unique, adaptable, and unpredictable, could become a valuable asset in a world dominated by raw strength and rigid tradition. However, the alien world was not without danger. Rumors of rival factions circulated, and the outpost that Elias had once called home could not be considered safe. Kaylara's declaration of him as her mate had political implications beyond his understanding. Other warlords would see him as a pawn, a symbol, or even a threat. Elias realized that survival depended on more than training. It required foresight, diplomacy, and careful calculation. Every interaction, every decision, every word spoken could have consequences that echoed far beyond the fortress walls. By the end of his second week, Elias had transformed in small but significant ways. His posture was straighter, his gaze sharper, and his confidence growing. He was still human, still vulnerable, but he had begun to harness the unique strengths of his species: creativity, adaptability, and intelligence. Kaylara watched this transformation with a mixture of curiosity and respect, seeing potential in the human that few others dared to acknowledge. As night fell over the fortress, Elias sat in his quarters, reviewing notes, maps, and observations. The stars above Rathar 9 twinkled coldly, distant and unfeeling. Yet within him a spark of determination burned brighter. He had entered a world where humans were considered weak, expendable, and insignificant, but he had already begun to prove otherwise. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, and perhaps the first real test of his abilities. For now he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He was unarmed, alone, and in a world that could crush him without thought. But he was learning. And learning, Elias realized, was the first step toward survival. Somewhere in the fortress, Kaylara watched over him, silent and vigilant. For the first time, she considered the possibility that the human she had claimed was not merely a pawn of prophecy, but a mind capable of altering the course of her world. The game had begun. The sun of Rathar 9 hung low in the sky, casting long, jagged shadows across the fortress. Elias moved through the corridors, carrying a small toolkit and a datapad, his mind racing with calculations and observations. The lessons with Kaylara had become routine, but today felt different. He could sense a tension in the air, a ripple of anticipation among the alien soldiers that made his instincts sharpen. He arrived at the central command chamber, where Kaylara awaited him, her figure framed by the glowing holographic maps. "Elias," she said, her tone measured, "we have a situation." Elias looked at the maps, noting the movement of unknown fleets at the edge of their territory. "Enemy vessels?" he asked, already scanning patterns. "Yes," Kaylara replied. "A rival faction approaches. They test our defenses, and their intent is clear. They believe we are unprepared." Elias's stomach tightened. He had prepared for challenges within the fortress, but this was different. This was immediate, real danger. He had no weapons, no soldiers under his command yet, but he had something else: his mind. Kaylara's officers debated tactics around him, their alien voices sharp and rapid. Elias struggled to follow their language fully, but their gestures, maps, and holographic indicators told him enough. Patterns emerged. The enemy's approach was predictable, their fleet formation unremarkable to a keen observer. "May I suggest something?" Elias asked hesitantly. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward him. He took a deep breath. "If we adjust the defensive drones to focus on these choke points and reroute power to the outer shields, we can funnel their fleet into a controlled path. It won't stop them entirely, but it will give us an advantage." Kaylara studied him silently. Then slowly she nodded. "Proceed," she said. Show me if a human mind can think like ours. Elias immediately set to work, moving through the fortress to the drone control stations. The alien operators watched him warily, unsure if a human could manage their complex systems. But Elias's fingers moved deftly, recalibrating energy flows, altering targeting matrices, and programming drones to react to enemy maneuvers. He did not have the raw power of Kalara's soldiers, but he had logic, creativity, and adaptability, the tools that humans had always relied on. The first wave of enemy ships arrived at the frontier. As predicted, the drones activated in perfect synchrony, forcing the attackers into narrow channels. Enemy vessels collided, scrambled, and faltered under the unexpected efficiency of the defenses. Elias's adjustments allowed the fortress's outer walls to remain intact, while inflicting significant losses on the attackers. Kalara's eyes gleamed with a mixture of surprise and admiration. She had seen countless commanders, warriors, and tacticians in her life, but none had approached the battle with the unexpected clarity that a human mind offered. Remarkable, she murmured, almost to herself. They are different. By the time the first assault subsided, Elias had earned more than just Kalara's acknowledgement. The alien soldiers, initially skeptical, began to see him as a contributor, not just a human tied to ritual. They followed his directives, tested his suggestions, and began coordinating with him seamlessly. The battle was not without cost. Some outer defense stations were damaged and a few soldiers were injured. But Elias had demonstrated a fundamental truth. Humans could adapt and think in ways that even the most disciplined alien forces could not predict. After the immediate threat passed, Kalara summoned him to the War Council. Holographic projections displayed the enemy fleet retreating, reorganizing at the edge of the sector. "You've done more than survive," she said, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of authority. "You have altered the outcome of this engagement. Do you understand what this means?" Elias nodded. "It means humans are underestimated," he said quietly. "And sometimes being unpredictable is the greatest advantage." Kalara allowed herself a faint smile. "Indeed, unpredictability is a weapon. You have shown me that humans are capable of more than I imagined." Over the next several days, Elias continued to apply his human ingenuity in smaller ways. He repaired malfunctioning equipment faster than the alien technicians, optimized resource distribution, and suggested modifications to defensive systems that allowed the fortress to operate more efficiently. Each success earned him more respect, though he remained cautious, knowing that admiration in this world was fragile. One evening, Kalara approached him as he was recalibrating a defensive drone. "You learn quickly," she noted. "But your greatest skill is not technology, it is observation. You notice what others ignore. You think in ways our soldiers do not, that is, rare." Elias smiled faintly, feeling a surge of pride. "I've always had to rely on my mind," he said. "Humans, we adapt. We find solutions." Kalara studied him closely as if measuring his potential. "And you have proven that even unarmed you can influence events that might otherwise crush you." "That is impressive." Her words struck him. Elias had entered this world powerless, unarmed, and bound by an alien ritual he barely understood. Yet through careful observation, logical thinking, and rapid adaptation, he had become a force to be reckoned with. Humans might not have had Kalara's strength or size, but they had intelligence, creativity, and determination, qualities that could turn the tide of any conflict. The next challenge came sooner than expected. Scouts reported that the rival faction was regrouping, planning a coordinated attack on multiple fronts. Kalara's council debated strategies for hours, their voices rising and falling with tension. Elias listened carefully, noting inconsistencies in their plans, gaps in their defenses, and potential opportunities. Finally, he spoke. "If we divide their attention, focus on controlling the choke points, and use the terrain to our advantage, we can minimize our losses while maximizing theirs. They expect a frontal assault, but a coordinated defense can turn their strength against them." Kalara's gaze was sharp. "Explain." Elias moved to the holographic map, tracing lines with his fingers. "See here," he said, pointing to the narrow passages through the mountains. "We station drones and infantry at these points. Their ships and ground forces will be forced into predictable positions. We can then concentrate fire and ambush their main units, weakening them before they reach the fortress walls. It is a risk, but a calculated one. The council fell silent. Kalara studied him, her eyes narrowing in thought. "Very well," she said at last. "We follow your strategy. You will lead the coordination." For Elias, the weight of responsibility was immense. He was a human in an alien fortress directing forces that were not his own. Every decision carried life and death consequences. But he felt a strange clarity. This was what humans did best: think, adapt, and overcome obstacles that seemed impossible. The battle began at dawn. Elias coordinated defensive positions, rerouted power to critical areas, and monitored enemy movements with precision. The enemy fell into the traps he had predicted, their predictable tactics meeting unexpected resistance. Drones struck from hidden angles, soldiers ambushed advancing units, and Kalara's elite forces held critical positions. By the end of the day, the rival faction was in retreat, suffering heavy losses while Kalara's fortress remained largely unscathed. The soldiers cheered, their confidence in the human who had guided them growing with each success. Kalara approached Elias, her eyes reflecting both pride and acknowledgement. "You have done more than survive," she said. "You have proven that strength is not only in muscle or weapon but in mind and ingenuity. Humans may indeed be unpredictable allies." Elias felt a swell of pride, tempered by exhaustion. He had come unarmed, alone, and uncertain. Now he had not only survived but had influenced events in a way that even Kalara respected. As night fell over Rathar 9, Elias looked out across the fortress walls at the stars, thinking of the challenges still to come. He had earned a measure of trust, but he knew the universe was vast, and danger was never far away. Yet for the first time he felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Humans had always been underestimated, and he was living proof that even in the most alien and hostile worlds, the human mind could shine. Kalara, watching from the shadows, allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Elias was more than a mate chosen by prophecy. He was a strategist, an innovator, and a symbol of a species that refused to be dismissed. In his quiet, clever ways, he had changed the fortress, the soldiers, and perhaps even her own perception of what humans could achieve. The frontier was dangerous, full of unknown enemies and unpredictable events. But Elias had learned that with observation, analysis, and human ingenuity, even the most impossible challenges could be met. And as long as he remained vigilant, creative, and adaptive, he could continue to thrive, even in the shadow of a warlord like Kalara. Tomorrow would bring new tests. Foes would return, rivals would scheme, and the universe would demand even more from him. But Elias had proven one essential truth: humans could shine where others faltered, and that truth would guide him through whatever came next. The days after the battle passed in a blur of activity. Elias found himself at the heart of Kalara's fortress, moving between war councils, training sessions, and repair stations. He no longer felt like an outsider. He was expected, observed, and increasingly relied upon. Yet the sense of unease remained. The universe had a way of punishing overconfidence. Kalara had grown more attentive toward him. Her presence, once intimidating and distant, now carried a different weight: curiosity, recognition, and a subtle approval. "Your human perspective is unusual," she told him one afternoon as they walked through the fortress gardens. Bioluminescent plants twisted around alien sculptures, casting strange colors across the ground. Elias glanced at her. "Unusual. Good or bad?" he asked. Kalara's lips curved faintly. "It has saved lives. It has made our defenses stronger. It has made me reconsider what I believed humans were capable of." Elias nodded, a flush of pride warming him. Yet he reminded himself not to let this recognition cloud his judgment. Respect in this world was fragile, easily lost, and often fleeting. He had learned to survive by observing, calculating, and adapting. Now he realized he had to think about leadership, alliances, and diplomacy, things that had never been part of his daily life on Earth. The council room buzzed with activity. Alien officers debated supply lines and strategic positions, while Kalara watched silently. Elias stepped forward with a suggestion, pointing to the map of nearby sectors. "If we secure trade routes here," he said, tracing a line between two key planets, "we gain resources without direct confrontation. It strengthens our position and forces rivals to reconsider attacks. We can negotiate from strength, not just fight from defense." Kalara studied him, eyes narrowing. "You understand leverage, not just tactics," she observed. You are learning quickly. The plan was adopted and the effects were almost immediate. The fortress became more efficient, the soldiers more confident, and word of human ingenuity spread. Rival factions began to hesitate before launching attacks, wary of an unknown element, Elias. One evening, as they reviewed reports in the command chamber, Kalara leaned slightly closer to him. You see patterns where others see chaos. That is the true power of your species, she said. Elias smiled faintly. I guess humans have always had to adapt, he replied. We survive by thinking, learning, and finding solutions others miss. Kalara regarded him silently, as if weighing the full meaning of his words. For the first time, Elias sensed that their bond was shifting from ritual to partnership. She was no longer merely a warlord with a human mate. She was considering him a collaborator, someone whose ideas could shape outcomes in ways even her seasoned advisors could not. Days later, a message arrived from a neutral sector requesting mediation in a dispute. Kalara chose Elias to accompany her. His human perspective, combined with Kalara's authority, made them a unique team. The negotiations were tense, full of alien customs and hidden threats, but Elias's calm reasoning and understanding of logic helped ease tensions. Your approach is subtle, Kalara remarked after one meeting. You do not command. You reason. It is effective, Elias shrugged. Humans often find negotiation safer than combat, he said. We can always fight if needed, but understanding first usually avoids unnecessary risk. Through these missions, Elias began to notice that Kalara's respect for him was growing into something deeper. It was not affection as humans understood it, but a genuine trust, rare among her people. He realized that being her mate was not only a cultural imposition, but also an opportunity to influence events, protect lives, and contribute to a civilization far beyond anything Earth had ever known. Back at the fortress, a rival faction attempted a subtle act of sabotage, infiltrating the outer systems to disable power grids. Elias immediately noticed anomalies in energy readings and patterns in communications. Using a combination of his human reasoning and the alien technology at his disposal, he identified the saboteurs before any damage could occur. Kalara arrived just as he was briefing the council. You have prevented what could have been a major loss, she said. Your intuition? It is uncanny, Elias gave a small smile. It's not intuition. Observation, analysis, deduction. Anyone could do it if they paid attention. Kalara's eyes softened slightly. Not anyone, she corrected. Perhaps only humans. From that moment, their collaboration deepened. Kalara began asking his advice not only on technical matters but also on strategy, alliances, and even training programs. Elias introduced small changes that improved efficiency and morale, earning the soldiers' trust. He realized that his human perspective was valuable precisely because it was different, unpredictable, and adaptable. As weeks turned into months, Elias and Kalara faced multiple challenges together. Enemy skirmishes tested their coordination. Supply shortages demanded creative solutions. Political negotiations required patience and tact. Each trial reinforced a simple truth. Their combined strengths, Kalara's power and command, Elias's ingenuity and logic, made them formidable. Elias began to see the fortress not as a prison but as a place where he could make a difference. He had entered unarmed, uncertain, and out of place. But now he was an advisor, a strategist, and a respected figure among both humans and aliens. The bond with Kalara had shifted from mere ritual to mutual respect, a rare and valuable connection in a world where power was often absolute and unforgiving. One night, standing on the fortress balcony, Elias watched the twin moons rise over the jagged horizon. Kalara joined him silently, her presence steady and reassuring. You have changed much since your arrival, she said. And I've learned much, Elias replied. I never imagined I could adapt to this. Kalara's expression was unreadable for a moment, then she nodded. You have not only survived but excelled. That is the way of your species. And perhaps it is the beginning of a new era. Elias looked at her, understanding the weight of her words. Their alliance was more than a personal bond. It was a partnership capable of shaping the future of entire sectors. Humans might have been underestimated, but he had proven that intelligence, adaptability, and careful reasoning could make them a force to be reckoned with. As the moons cast silver light over the fortress, Elias felt a sense of purpose. He had survived, adapted, and earned trust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he was ready. Together with Kailara, he could face them, and perhaps even change the destiny of the galaxy. The horizon of Rethar 9 glowed red with the first light of dawn, signaling the beginning of what could be the most critical day in the fortress's history. Rumors of a coalition of hostile factions had reached Kailara's ears weeks ago. Now, the moment of confrontation had arrived. Elias walked alongside Kailara through the command halls. Soldiers prepared for battle, their movements precise, disciplined, and tense. He could feel the weight of anticipation heavy in the air. Today their combined efforts would be tested. Elias, Kailara said, her voice quiet but firm. All eyes will be on us. The outcome of this battle will determine the course of this sector for decades. Your strategies, your insight, it will be critical. Elias nodded. He was no longer the unarmed human who had awoken to an alien warlord declaring him a mate. He had spent months learning, observing, advising, and planning. Now his mind, creativity, and analysis would guide the fortress through its most dangerous trial yet. The enemy fleet appeared on the holographic maps, moving in coordinated formation. Their numbers were formidable, their tactics precise. But Elias had studied their patterns. He had anticipated their movements and prepared defenses, ambushes, and contingencies. The human ability to predict, adapt, and exploit logic where others relied on strength alone gave them an advantage few expected. Deploy drones to these choke points, he instructed, pointing to the narrow mountain passes surrounding the fortress. Station infantry here. Concentrate firepower on the outer wings. The enemy will be forced into predictable positions. Kailara observed silently, then nodded. Proceed. You lead this engagement. The battle began at first light. Elias coordinated strikes, rerouted energy flows, and monitored enemy movements with precision. The drones activated exactly as he predicted, forcing the enemy into narrow paths. Their ships collided, their ground forces funneled into ambushes, and Kailara's elite soldiers struck at critical positions. The fighting was intense, but Elias remained calm. His human mind processed every detail, adapted to changing circumstances, and anticipated enemy maneuvers. What humans lacked in raw strength they made up for with ingenuity and foresight. By midday, the enemy coalition was in retreat. Losses were significant, morale among the attackers shattered. Kailara's fortress remained intact, largely unscathed thanks to Elias's strategies. Soldiers cheered, and even the most skeptical officers now regarded him as indispensable. Kailara approached him after the engagement. You have done more than survive, she said. You have reshaped this battle and perhaps the future. Humans may indeed be unpredictable allies. Elias allowed himself a small smile. We just think differently, he said. Sometimes that's all it takes. With the immediate threat neutralized, Kailara addressed the soldiers. Today we have demonstrated power, but also strategy.